Hashem Yisbarach. Yom Revi le Parshas Teruma. Days the Rosh Chodesh Adar Rishon. Yesterday we mentioned how the mitzvah of Binyan HaMishkan, which was for the purpose of Hashroyes HaShechina, there was a requirement of Nedivus Halev. There was a requirement of doing something completely Meiratzon HaTov. We want to point out that that's a very unusual thing. Generally, we say, Godel HaMetzuva V'oisa Yoser Misha'ein Metzuva V'oisa. Greater is somebody who's Metzuva V'oisa more than somebody who's not Metzuva V'oisa. Now, what's the gadlus of someone who does something out of a feeling of Metzuva V'oisa? He's Oved Hashem mitoich a hechrich. So Tiferes asks this question, and he says, why is a Metzuva V'oisa more greater than someone who's not a Metzuva V'oisa, and still in all, he does it b'hisnadvus, b'nedivas liba, willingly. B'ritzoynei HaTov. The Tiferes says that the Metzuva V'oisa is a person that is doyek. It is somebody whose mind is doyek that maybe he won't fulfill his obligation. Now, what is the difference? If somebody is an Einoi Metzuva V'oisa, Tiferes says, he does not experience an emotion of daiga, of worry. He's happy to do what he's doing. If it's not perfect, if it's not bediktu godel, it's nish geferlich. And on the other hand, we find that there's somebody who does something, mitzad, Metzuva V'oisa, he feels that he's an eved, there's a certain servitude. He feels a hechrich to do what he's doing. That therein lies Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shemayim. Someone who does something for somebody at a Kabbalas oil is greater. Now, what does greater mean? Is he a greater person? Does that mean to say a husband who's petrified from his wife, and therefore he goes shopping, and therefore he makes calls, and therefore he does all kind of wonderful things? Or a wife that's petrified from her husband's wrath is going to get ticked off, and all day long she's worried because of his wrath. Is that better? Is that greater than someone, a couple, who perform actions out of love for each other? Imagine you met a wife, and you see the wife is preoccupied with the ratzon of her husband. And you ask her, why are you so preoccupied? It's very impressive. I've seen this in my life, and I've posed this question. And on some occasions, rare, that they usually don't tell you the truth. You never saw one woman told me, you never saw my husband's reaction when his will is not fulfilled. So I want to keep the boat steady. And I felt terrible for her. And I once had a man who was a person that used to wake up 5 o'clock every morning and daven and go to work. And he worked literally 10 to 12 hours a day. And then he would come home and his wife would tack on the refrigerator a whole list of chores that she expected him to do. And the man, I used to learn with him when after work, it was like, I saw it was like, that stopped. The guy was petrified. I said, what's the pshat? He said, trust me, you don't want to discover her wrath. Baruch Hashem, I was zeicher to discover her wrath. And it wasn't pretty. And I realized how dangerous this was. This was a woman who wrote a letter to her husband that she was very happy the shaykhs we had as long as I was getting him to do her will. But when I was telling him to free himself from the bonds with a smile and just ignore it and let her scream a little bit and get used to it, that you're also a free person, you're not an Eved Kanani over here, so good enough you bring home a big fat parnasa for her, a few $100,000 a year. Why should you have to service also? Or also? Well, get a servant. You have a problem getting a servant? No, I pay for a servant. I pay for people working in the house. And she stays home all day. But she says, she told me once, you're now tiring us to stay home all day? I said, maybe if you started working a little bit, it wouldn't be so tiring. Everybody gets tired on vacations. But I couldn't believe it. This is a very scary person, to say the least. And anybody who didn't do her will, but I told the husband eventually, now is that a nice thing to do? It was awful. So you have to know, first of all, that when you do something between a person and another person, a husband and a wife, where the relationship is based on the love and respect, then there's no question about it. What you prefer is a relationship based on ahava, as opposed to daiga and hechus. But on the other hand, let's say you have an employee who works for you, and you have to get a job done. There's a specific job that he has to do. And he says, I love this job. Now, that's great. But I want him to feel like he's a mukhrich also. See, when somebody acts out of love, so what happens is, love usually wanes. It goes up and down. It doesn't stay all the time. Even if a guy likes a job, there are many people who like doing what they're doing, but if there's no hechrich to do what they're doing, the nature is they tend to slack off. But if a guy knew that he would lose his job, or as much as he loves his job, he also has a hechrich to do the job, because he might lose his job, then you know that person is going to be a better producer and a better product. So it depends on the relationship. I know a fellow who was looking for a job. So somebody told him, looking for employees, somebody told him, you know, the kind of job you have, there are a lot of people who love doing it. He said, I don't want volunteers, because volunteers are not committed. That's why they're volunteers. Even if they enjoy the job, they're only committed as much as their enjoyment and as much as they don't have something else. I want them to get paid. They have to know they have something to lose by lack of performance. I know a person who once was going for a shtel, and the fellow who was interviewing, asked the person, what's your shaloi lishma? I want to know what your shaloi lishma is. You need the parnasa? Is that important to you? I want to know what your shaloi lishma is. The guy who answered him, I don't need the parnasa. Just want to shtel. He wouldn't hire. That guy has no hechers. So you have to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have a dual relationship. HaKadosh Baruch Hu first wants us to have a Kabbalah's oil malchus shemayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be a doyik. If a person, the first thing you do is you train a child from baby, Shema Yisroel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That's Kabbalah's oil malchus shemayim. A person has to know that doing mitzvahs is a very nice thing, but it's not a choice. Anybody who does mitzvahs at a choice, whenever he doesn't feel a hechrich, he doesn't perform. You show me a person in the yeshiva that just does what he's supposed to do without a hechrich, that person is what you call a fair weather talmid. When the weather is fair, then he's being a talmid, and he's learning, and he's performing. The weather's not perfect, guy just misses Sidorim, and there's no consequences. So the guy says, where would I want to learn? There has to be a consequence. Because otherwise, so the person who understands there's a consequence. I remember my Zayda, when he used to give shiurim, the Balabatim, I was amazed. Growing up and listening to him, put an oil on these people. I'll never forget, he would call all the Balabatim and he would say to them, where were you last night for the shir? I remember thinking, what's in his business? The guy's like 60 years old already. Where were you last night? And the guy would say, I went away with my wife. He would say, don't do it again on that night. Find some other time. This is too valuable, you don't miss. That became the hechus. They were petrified to him. Now, of course, he gave encouragement and he commended somebody who came. But you knew you didn't come, you had to answer. And sometimes even family simchas, know what you should say? Next time, send your wife. You go to learn. You have a kviyas, your kviyas comes first. Now, a person who just comes out of love, so whenever anything else comes up, okay, now I love that, now I love this. So I'm not here for that. I don't love it that much. And that's what happens. So it's interesting that even though Godel HaMitzuva V'Ois and doing something out of Yiras Shamayim is a basic way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to serve Him. And that's why you have to know that children, when they have a chinuch, and a talmid, when he has a chinuch, he has to understand, he has to perform out of yira. Now what happens is many people don't like to work out of hechrich. And these same people, when they go to jobs in the world, I'm amazed. If they don't step up to the plate and they act like yeshivish, they lose their jobs right away. I've read so many articles from people who tried to employ yeshiva people who went through the system. Some were more matzliach, some were less matzliach, but they didn't go to work, and they think that it's like the yeshiva. You tell your chavrusa, you look at the clock, it's 10:30, you give a stretch, 10:30. I have to go out for a few minutes, I have to go to the bathroom. You show up 11:20, you're coming back. What happened? I ask you, you go to the bathroom, and the guy goes to work, tries the same shtick. Does the exact same thing. After twice, the boss gives him a notice. Your performance. What's the matter? You can't go to the bathroom in this place? The boss said, it's not a yeshiva. It's a workplace. Welcome to the real world. Or the guy shows up 20 minutes late in the workplace. No such thing. You're 20 minutes late, you don't have a job. What are you, chutzif? You're a behavior, not a man. You have no seichel. You have no achrayes. Oh, but I tried to come in time. My wife had a thing. I had to stop. Abai, don't let me breakfast. I daven longer. I had a daven this. He knows such music. People don't understand, they're like babies. And when you tell them, wake up and smell the coffee. So one guy told me, I guess I'm never going to go to work. I'm going to remain in yeshiva all my life. I said, you're going to be a lo yutzlach because you have no sense of any Kabbalah's oil. Now I want to explain something. What kind of Kabbalah's oil is not correct? What kind of Kabbalah's oil is wrong? And what kind of Kabbalah's oil is right? You have to know my Jesus. It's still 10 to 3. Second day is fine. Only one excuse. Very hurtful. And a person has to understand what's hechrich is not good and what hechrich is not good. See, a person who presumably is in a yeshiva, and that person in the yeshiva, presumably, he wants to be in the yeshiva. And presumably, he wants to be matzliach. So he understands there are performances that are necessary to do. You have somebody who doesn't want to be in yeshiva. He's there either because it's a parking lot, or because his parents pushed him into it, or because he got married and the system said, you have to be in yeshiva. That's why so many in life are falling off the tracks. They thought they're going to learn, long-time learners. Anybody tell me a long-time learner, you know what I say? Show me how you learn that. I can tell you right now how long you're going to learn. 5 years are going to be a nest. I remember a guy told me, he was fighting about the panos and support. He said, I need 10 years support. I said, 10 years support? If you learned for 10 years, Mashiach would come. I tell him, if you learn for 5 years, it's going to be a nest. A year and a half after the guy got married, he started to flake off. So I gave the guy a call. I said, I heard you flaking off. So what happened to the 5 or 10 years? I said, you're doing bad. Not time easy. I said, you're just doing terrible. You're not even doing remotely what you're supposed to do. Okay, I guess you're right. Maybe it's not for me. You're a kappa, you failure what you are. You're a failure of society. You're not going to be able to do a job. Don't be a menial labor that can do one of these cleaning jobs in the yeshiva. You can come middle of the night and maybe clean the yeshiva. Maybe you'll get a job like that. He'll do it in the middle of the night when no one's around. They won't see him when he comes. You have to check in. When you go to a job, you have to clock in. You clock out. It's not a hefkerel. And how many times I see it in all the newspapers, all the magazines from people, they write, I can't hire yeshiva people because they have such a yeshivish attitude, like sukumse, and they're doing me a favor, taking my money. They don't understand I'm running a business, and they don't understand it's not achrayus to the business. They're mufkar, they're mufkarim, they're petroya adam, they're ganovim, they're gazlonim. It's budget. They lack basic decency. Somebody, remember a guy was asking, where did these guys, they never any chinuch in yeshiva? I said, no. No. That's what happened. So that's why there must be a hechrich. A person has to train himself to be a mukhrich. But the hechrich is a great thing when it's a hechrich that you really want to succeed. If you don't want to be in yeshiva and a guy is machriach you, then it's a failure. Then it's like putting a gun to your head and a guy being machriach you to dance in the snow. That's never going to be productive. That's not going to be Kabbalah soil. We're talking about being makabel, the oil that I want to be makabel. We're talking about a person saying, I have a ratzin to do the ratzin of Hashem, and I want to be a mukhrich. I really want to feel like I have no choice. So then you have to put yourself in a misgeres, and that misgeres creates a situation. But if a person wakes up and says, I don't want to be in the yeshiva, and then somebody goes and forces him, then it's terrible. Then that's no purpose. A behemoth, you machriach, because the behemoth's job, tafkid, is to work. So you machriach, you train him. You have to you machriach him till he's trained. If a person doesn't want to be trained, but presumably a person in yeshiva wants to be trained. So that's number one. A person has to have, that creates performance. Fear creates the greatest performance. What motivates people is there's no motivator like a hecher. The worst thing is a guy that doesn't care. There was once a guy that learned over here, and he was the most laid-back citizen you ever met in the world. I mean, there was no hecher. He came to me to get a hecher. He asked me, help me get a hecher. He was the kind of guy who used to come one day, and he liked to learn. He enjoyed learning. He had a stick of lump to copy of it. He said, what can I do? Just wake up again. And you go to sleep all times. And I loved the guy. I was a nice guy. I still was shachista. And then he got married. And he married a very rich girl. And they zogged him to all kind of money. But his father-in-law and mother-in-law expected him to produce. You know what he said? Let me tell you about myself. I'm a chilled out, laid back kind of guy. You can shout, you can scream, you can threaten. I don't care. Nothing motivates me. So the parents said, okay, we won't support you. He said, I'll figure something out. He said, we won't give you a car. He said, no, I guess I don't need a car. There was nothing. I remember thinking, you need a car? He said, meditation. So I'll stay in bed some more. He said, meditation. You want to go shopping? He said, my wife will need a car too. She'll figure something out. Don't worry about it. They're not going to let her drown. You understand? They'll say, they got his wife a car. They said, he can't drive it. He said, Baruch Hashem, I have to go less shopping. The guy left everything. He took a bus, he went there to Yisroel. There was nothing. This one little says, is there anything, my brother, you know him, is there any way I can get to him to get back? He said, this guy, nothing. Zero. You couldn't anger him. You took away all the clothes from him. He wouldn't buy. I have your shirt back right now. That'll be enough. I'm telling you, he was the most laid-back kind of guy. And I explained to the guy, that's the worst thing. He said, no, it's what, and it was destroying his life. And he went from there, he said, I like to learn, it's not good enough. No. He went there to Yisroel, and what he ended up? He ended up staying hours in internet cafes. Hours. He used to tell me, Rebbe, you know, it's a bad. You know how many shooting guys here? I'm not alone. I'm not sure which is the Beismenders. I just think I found the second Beismenders. That's all. What are you doing there? He's watching movies. Watch my movies. I'm not doing bad things. I'm watching movies. Just chilling out, you know what I mean? And they threatened they're not going to give him an apartment. They bought him a house. They bought him an apartment. They bought him an apartment. I said, you see, I didn't get this stuff anyway. You know, so it was tacky, the terrible side. I told him it's the worst thing. He said, I know. Till he finally decided he wants a job. He wanted a job because his life was pushing so boring. He was driving himself nuts. He said he was going sugar from boredom, from doing nothing for years. So he decided he's getting himself a job. He got him a job in the store. He worked in the store, but they told him, you gotta come on time. You gotta come on time, you gotta do the job. So if you don't, but he came. You know why? He was afraid he'd go back to being bored. He used to wander the streets. He said, that was that bored me. So now he had a hechrich. He had a hechrich. I even told the guy to hire him. That was another time of the month. And he did a good job, because he had a hechrich. And then he said to me, now I'm bored from my job. What should I do now? I said, why don't you go to school? Get something. See, you can do it? Yeah, I go to school every day. If you're bored enough, and you feel a hechrich, you can do it. So he went to school, and he graduated, he got a course. He didn't decide to work in that area. He tried selling cars, he tried Schwartz on the side. But he's still finding himself. But I said, you can do it. You took a job, you got the course, you graduated, you're capable of doing something. Very capable guy. No hechrich, that's the worst thing in a person's life. If you have a chance to have an oil to do what you want to do, never give that up. Never give that up, never let that go. Put yourself in a misgeris, in a situation. That's why you live in a neighborhood. I just met a nice, wonderful young man when I was out of town. And I miss a nice guy. And I was machazik him a lot, a while back, now a couple months ago. And he changed his life, generally, tremendously. And I told him, do you have a hechrach? He said, no. I said, you have to join a shul and a neighborhood where you feel you have some pressure. You have to perform. You can't daven one day in one shul, next day no shul, the next day in a third shul, the next day no shul, because end up davening no shul, then you end up not davening at all. You need a hechrach. You need to be in the miskeres. So people ask you, where were you? How come you didn't come davening? How come you come davening? That becomes your hechrach. He said, you're right, I know I need it. He said, do it. Make the move. That's what a person has to have. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us in our avodas Hashem, he generally wants us to do. But then there's another whole aspect of our relationship to Hashem. It's called the Ahava, the Ahavas Klulei Saich. Where our relationship is one of Ahava. It's one of total love that I'm motivated completely out of love. And that was Binyan HaMishkan. Binyan HaMishkan was requirement. Hashem said, I don't want you to build the Mishkan out of a feeling of, I have to. I want you to build the Mishkan out of a feeling of, I really want to become one with you, Hashem. For Hashem to have a Shechina, Shoira Beinechem, for Hashem to live with us, that demands a Dveikus and an Ahava. The Gemara's Chazal tell us, there's a Tzaddik and there's a Chassid. What is a Chassid? Chazal tell us a chassid eizehu chassid hamischased im koine. He poshet does chesed with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know HaKadosh Baruch Hu does chesed with us. Olam chesed yibon. What is the meaning that we do chesed with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So the Mesilas Yesharim in Perek Yud Ches explains that the madrega of a chassid is someone, a tzaddik does chayvasa. He does everything he's supposed to do because that's the ratzon of Hashem. The chassid does it because he wants to do it. That's the chassid. And this is what he says. In a mitzvahs hamutalis al kol Yisroel, kvar yiduisim. Everybody knows the mitzvahs. And their obligation is known to what degree you have to do. But someone who's oyev es haboyrei yisbarach shemoi ahavo amitis, he's never going to be mishtadel and focus to pattern himself in what is known he fulfilled his obligation. That everybody is included. This fellow is going to be like a ben who loves his father. If the father would just be megala his das a little bit, that he wants something, the son will already increase in this matter, and in this ma'aser, whatever he's able to. Even though his father never told him, even pam achas ubachatzi dibu. He's mavid. This is the ratzon of his father, even though he didn't say it beferish. He wants to bring. He says, know what that causes? That brings oise nachas ruach love. Ashrei mi shegadol b'Torah v'amoli b'Torah is wonderful. You know what the highest madrig is? V'oise nachas ruach liyotzar. He does a nachas ruach. A person. Many people do things for their father that looks like Av. It's not. They're doing it because they want their father to love them back. Or they want their father to give them something. Or they want their mother to think they're special. So they'll go to the mother, do you need the garbage taken out? Do you need me to go shopping for you? Oh, what a good son, what a nice son. I didn't even tell him, I didn't scream at him to take the garbage out. And he came to think, oh, what a son. That's what a person has to understand. That's not what it is. He says a person who's avo, when you see be'ishli ishto, he says, an avo b'noi, a rabbi v'talmidoi, when it's people who have an ava aza be'emes beineihem, they never say, I'm doing as much as is expected of me. And I'm going to satisfy myself with that. They're going to do more. They never look to absolve themselves or exonerate themselves. That's called oise nachas ruach liyitzur. That's what a chassid is. A chassid is somebody who does things not necessarily with a tzivui, something he versteht is the Ratzon Hashem, not because he's looking for schar, not because Hashem wants Hashem to mekabel his tefillas, or because he wants any other interests, because he wants to do that Ava Hashem. You have to understand that this Bechina of Ava was the requirement for the Binyan HaMishkan. For the Mishkan, to have that Dveikus b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what was required was a person doing the Ratzon of Hashem. Now, most of us will struggle all our lives with doing what we're chayiv to do, out of Yiras Hashem. Most of us will struggle to be mekabel oil malchus shamayim. And hopefully we'll get stronger and we'll do what the Ratzon of Hashem is, kefi chayv v'seid. But there's nothing wrong with a person working on Ahavas Hashem also. Isaiah used to speak about this all the time, and he would say that a person should just sit in his house or walk in the street and think about all the chesed that Hashem bestowed upon him. All the health, all the bracha, all the hatzlacha, in spite of everything he didn't do right. And you know what he should say? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I love you. Now it's very difficult. I've done this many times, and every time you do, you start to second guess yourself. Am I saying this because I'm trying to get on Hashem's good side? Am I saying this because I want Hashem to really give me some extra candy, extra bracha? That's what I'm trying to say. It's very hard to know the answer. But if a person thinks that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to love you. I know myself better than anybody else, and I'm thinking, what are my motivations really? But I would love to love you, Hashem. I know I should love you. That itself is a maisa of his kashrus and dveikus b'Hashem. And then you're supposed to think, Hashem, I'm going to be makabel to do, at the very least, what you want me to do. But then you should think that maybe I'm going to learn a little extra. Maybe I'm going to come a little earlier. Tell you a story. Amazing. Somebody slept most of the day. It's unbelievable. Missed a first Seder and was resting. Somebody came and woke him up 5-10 minutes before it was time for second Seder. The person had a timer, like, how'd you wake me up 10 minutes? Why'd you wake us early for? Why'd you wake us so early for? And I'm thinking to myself, am I crazy? Could there be something more retarded? No. The answer is, that's the pshat. I want such a so minimally to do what I'm obligated, that I feel that if 5 minutes before second Seder starts, you wake me up, in 5 minutes I can go to the washroom, I can wash my face, wash my hands, I can get dressed, I can go to second Seder to learn. 5 minutes is plenty. There's a guy that tells me wakes up before Shachta. When do you wake up? 7 minutes. So you expect from after a whole night's sleep, 7 minutes, to come to Shachris and be there? It means you don't even want to do the hechrich. You have no interest in doing what you have to do. It's not shying. It means you're lechatchila doing the head, you're not the rutzin. I'm going to break your rutzin to be there 7:15. I'm not going to head you be there 7:15. Not even a 10. And it's everything in our lives like this. And we do this with Hashem. We do this the minimal that I feel, I don't have to feel guilty. That's not even you. What if a person would say, I'm going to come 5 minutes early? You know why? Not because I know it's going to be a big schus, not because I know if I'm sorry shaynim, I'm going to get all the schar kineket kulam, and not because I'm going to do it just out of a ma'aseh av. Even if you do it one day, that's also av. That's also av. Do an act of love to your parents one day, it's also an act of love. The next minute you talk back to them, you mischatzer to them. That's how people are. People are fegelach. They keep on going back and forth. They switch. They don't have to stay steady. But a person has to understand that there's a concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, Rotzen HaToiv. If you want to have a iskashrus, you want to give me nachas ruach. Hashem says it's a nachas ruach. It's amazing that Hashem even created such as Hashem doesn't need any nachas ruach. Ru'u beria shebaroba lon Hashem says. Yisroel Hashem b'choy aspire Hashem says. Look at these creatures that I created. Hashem says. The oiseh nachas ruach, I tell them to do this, and the medaktik in achila, in brachas, in tahara, in tumah. Kadosh Baruch Hu gets nachas ruach. Kadosh Baruch Hu appreciates. Now, of course, if you do things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appreciate, it's definitely going to bring you bracha v'atzlach. And if you go to the other extreme, you're going to be mafki yourself. From even doing the Ratzon Hashem, it's definitely not going to bring you bracha v'atzlach. So let us be mechazik ourselves to do, at the very basic, the Ratzon of Hashem 100%, like it's a job, and at the very least, to do things once in a while out of Avigdor.